I'm on a road trip and we are going to find out exactly how far you can push this Lexus RZ on a single charge in the real world. At the end of the video, I'm going to share my costs with you and break it all down. And to start off the video, I top this off to 100% at home. And yes, I'm using traffic jam assist, which means, look, Ma, no hands. So far, I've driven 17 miles on my road trip and it says I've already used up 50 miles. Not the best way to start. It's steering for me, it's braking for me. It seems to be doing a pretty good job in this pretty terrible LA traffic. So we're on one of my typical road trips. We're gonna see exactly how far I can get this thing to go. Am I tripping? Road trips are not supposed to be a good idea in this Lexus RZ. And there are two different trim packages here. You can get the premium, but do I look like a premium kind of guy to you? I don't think I'm very premium. I think I'm the luxury kind of dude, and that's exactly what I'm sitting in. It's the luxury version, and it has 20-inch wheels and tires, and that comes with a little bit of a penalty, and the penalty is the range. In theory, this is going to be able to get 196 miles of range, and if you downgrade to the premium, you're going to get up to 220 miles of range. Now, so far, it's not looking so good here, but we're going to see if I can get some of this back. Yes, I know this is not the ultimate road trip EV. Got to put my hands back in the wheel. That's going to be something like a Tesla, if we're going to be honest here. Or maybe something else. There's a lot of competitors in this price space. But we're going to see how far I can take this, and we're going to see exactly what this thing is like to drive on a road trip. And so far, I can tell you, this is a very, very comfortable car. Of course, it's super quiet, but the interior is quite premium. Is it luxury? I don't know. Actually, there are some differences between the luxury and the premium. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So far on the road trip, I've got the traffic jam assist going. I've got the optional Mark Levinson audio system in here, which is excellent. And I've got a huge big display in front of me, and I've got a pretty decent display in front of the driver. It's giving me a lot of information. And I like the way this car looks. I think it's a very sharp looking car. And so far, I really like the way it drives. So I think what we're looking at here is a vehicle that has checked a lot of boxes for me for a city electric car. At least that's my personal impression of it. Let's talk about how this Lexus is to drive, because after all, Lexus driving signature is part of their DNA now. And Lexus driving signature is something that is supposed to make the cars more fun to drive, more entertaining, you're supposed to be more at harmony with the car. And that is through better steering and better braking and all kinds of things like that. And I can tell you that the ride quality in here is really good. I've driven a lot of EVs, and the EV problem typically is that they are very, very heavy. And so because of that, you need to compensate with heavy springs and dampers, which are fairly stiff in order to control all the ride motion that you're getting. And here, even though this car weighs about 4,500 to 4,600 pounds, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like a lighter vehicle. And that is because of the suspension design. We have McPherson's strut up front, and we have a multi-link rear end, but in the rear end, we have trick dampers. They're called frequency reactive dampers, and what that means in real life is that as you're going over road surfaces that are imperfect, on the rebound stroke, you're gonna have a variable amount of rebound, so it's not going to be consistent. So as you're going over one kind of bump, you're going to have a softer rebound. On another kind of bump, it's going to be a little bit harder. And that all sounds kind of fancy, but in real life, it actually works pretty well, I think. The ride quality in here is very, very good indeed. And I'm not getting a lot of impact harshness like I am with some cars that have like the really, really stiff EV tires. I'm just sort of not getting that. I'm getting a much more Lexus ride quality. And I think that's really, really key to the Lexus owner who is looking for that. So of course, this is on the eTNGA platform, and this is Toyota's first attempt at a mass market EV. The other vehicles that are on this platform, of course, are the Subaru Solterra and the Toyota BZ4X. Now, these cars have not been particularly well received by the media so far. I have not driven the Solterra, I have driven the BZ4X, and I can tell you this is a much nicer driving experience. Now, we've got a 73-ish kilowatt hour battery in here. It is not the biggest battery, and that of course limits range. These 20-inch wheels and tires do have an effect on range, and the maximum range is supposed to be about 196. I don't know that I'm gonna hit that, but I'm not gonna try because there just aren't a lot of chargers where I'm going right now. So we have two motors in here. They call them e-axle. And actually they are rolling out these e-axles to other vehicles, other hybrids in the Toyota lineup. So in the rear we have an 80 kilowatt e-axle, an electric motor. In the front it's about 150. So total output is about 308 horsepower. And this is supposed to do 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds or so. And we are going to test that a little bit later. It certainly is not the fastest EV by any stretch of the imagination, but it does not feel slow. And now I think we're going to get an opportunity to try traffic jam assist. A car just pulled in front of me, and there you can see what the dashboard looks like. So it's pretty effective so far. The only other car that I tried traffic jam assist in so far is the brand new Prius. Actually works pretty well in there, and this is a system that will follow the traffic, and actually you can take your hand off the wheel up to about 25 miles an hour. Now I have noticed in the past that traffic jam assist can get a little bit thrown if a car cuts in front of you suddenly. I'm not sure how many cameras they're employing for this technology, but it doesn't seem to be as aware of the vehicles around it as some other vehicles that are driven that probably have more cameras. All right, so right there, it beeped at me one more time again. But let's get back to the technology that we're talking about in this vehicle. Pretty good pickup when you need to get around somebody. Now, it has been argued by many that Toyota and Lexus are a little bit late to the EV party, and perhaps that is true, because this ET&G architecture is their first attempt at mass market EVs. And earlier in the video I said that it has not been received well by the press, and that is because the range in this just is not as good as other EVs at the price point that you get right now. And this is a relatively expensive car. And the Solterra and the BZ4X are certainly quite a bit cheaper, but in terms of the range, this is not really class leading. In fact, it is not even in the middle of the class for the price point. It's relatively low. And that is the main reason why people don't seem to review these pretty well. But I can tell you from a driving and comfort perspective, this car is really, really quite comfortable to drive. This is one of my favorite EVs so far. This definitely feels a little bit bigger than the UX, the Lexus UX. It has a bigger back seat, and actually behind me, when both rows are up, you get about 23 cubic feet of cargo capacity back there. So it feels big enough, I guess I'm going to say. It actually is a size of EV that, or rather SUV, that personally I like quite a bit. I'm not a fan of the big mega SUVs, and this does not feel big in my small driveway. This feels like something that is easy to drive around the city. Now we have a bunch of different drive modes in this, which you access through these buttons on the steering wheel here. And so it has this heads-up display in front of me, and so as I move my thumb around them, I can change what they're going to do, and they're programmable and updatable, presumably. There's very little physical switch gear on here, which I'm not a big fan of. I really wish the drive modes were on a button. All right, so I'm going down a big hill. I'm putting some juice back into the battery. I've got, it stated it's 118 miles of range right now, and I've got 52 to go, so I think I'm going to make it pretty well. But it does seem to be using up a fair bit of electricity here. So right now, my average is 2.9. It just moved up to 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And that is sort of the new miles per gallon. It's the new MPG. So a kilowatt hour is akin to a gallon. So basically, the more miles per kilowatt hour that you get, the more efficient it is. So the modes are Eco, Sport, Normal, Range, and I think there's a custom mode too. Now it's a little bit odd to have an Eco mode and then a range mode on top of that, but I noticed when I put it into range mode, it showed me that I had the most amount of distance I could go in this car. I'm currently driving an Eco. Let me put it in range mode and see what happens. And it went up to 142 miles of range. So I also felt that the AC just turned down a little bit too. So my display got a little bit dimmer, everything got a little bit dimmer. So we're just going to continue to drive in this range mode, which is a very strange kind of moniker. Now it is showing my battery. My battery is showing as still about 3/4 full, so maybe it's not as as bad as I think. Maybe the storyline here is I'm gonna get to my charger without any issue. Maybe if it's looking really good, I'm gonna go up the hill and we can do some nice cinematic shots up in my favorite hill. I am feeling a little bit warmer though right now. I think it actually turned off the heating and ventilation system. It turned it off completely, so I've got no AC right now. So that is the penalty that I'm facing. When I've got the heating and ventilation turned on, and even the AC isn't on, it's just the fan is running right now, I've got 112 miles of range, but when I turn it off, it goes up to 141. So about 30 miles of range is lost just by having the fan in the car circulating the air. That seems like a pretty inefficient fan, or something's pretty inefficient in the system. That's a lot of range just by having a little bit of comfort. What if I crack the windows open? Well, now it's super loud and it is a little bit cooler, but I'm not going to be driving on the freeway at high speed with the windows cracked. I'm definitely going to be having my fan running even if the AC isn't running. I noticed in range mode, it won't let me set my target speed with the adaptive cruise control over 63 miles an hour. And right now I'm going 61. If I put my foot down, it goes up to 62. I'm about half throttle right now, accelerator. If I put it all the way down, then it overrides it, but it really doesn't want me going over about 61 miles an hour. I guess that is where the efficiency starts to drop. Kind of an interesting technique, I guess, to improve range. Let me just put it in eco mode here and just see what happens. Now, one thing to note is that this is a pre-production vehicle. Lexus has gone to a point of actually putting a big note in the vehicle. This is pre-production, so it is very likely that the software does not function exactly as it's going to be in a customer delivered vehicle. This only has about 1,800 miles on it, so there have not been a lot of people that have actually driven this so far. I put it back in eco mode, and yes, I can go easily over 62 miles an hour. Now I'm driving about 70, so in fact, in range mode, it's just restricting you to keep you at that best possible range for the battery. So at this point, normally I would have arrived at the charging station. However, I've actually decided to skip it, and that's because I'm exactly 101 miles into my trip, and it shows that I'm at 50% battery left, which is actually kind of surprising. I didn't think I'd actually hit the intended range. I'm a little skeptical. I'm not sure that we can do it, but let's go up this hill and let's try to see what kind of range we're getting. So far, I'm averaging 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is actually better than I expected. Let's see if the Takumis who assembled this car at the Motomachi plant are going to get me all the way up this 10-mile hill. I'm not exactly sure how much elevation gain I'm going to get here, but I think it's going to be in the order of at least 1,000 feet, which is not insignificant. So I'm going to let this BMW pass me, and I'm just going to stick behind this Subaru here because I'm feeling the Japanese vibes are gonna do well for me today. I'm not sure how many miles I've gone since we started that, but now I'm down to 86 miles of range, and I do have the heating and ventilation system turned off just so I can sort of optimize and maximize things. Now, I'm not going up here particularly fast because I am sitting behind this Subaru, and you can see it's pretty foggy right now. I notice when I'm in this range mode, it's actually smoothing out the throttle inputs quite a bit. When I take my foot off the gas, actually it sort of keeps the throttle going. And I know throttle isn't the right term, but I'm used to it. But you know, the range is a mysterious thing, and we are going into the fog. We're gonna figure out what the actual range is. It has dropped rather precipitously going up this hill. I was at 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Now I'm at 2.7, and I've lost about 12 miles of range so far going up this hill, and I've only gone about 4 miles, so it is pretty steep, but I think we'll be able to get some of it back on the way down. Going up that hill, I used roughly 25 miles of range. Not very good. It says I have 75 miles of range, which is definitely not enough to get back. I need to go now about 110 miles, but we're gonna see if I can get some of that back going down the hill. So I'm gonna try the difference between normal mode with the steering, see what it feels like on this beautiful little winding road, see if we have that Lexus driving signature. Can I feel what's coming through the steering wheel? A little bit. It feels a little more damped, rather. There's a little more isolation in the steering than I think in some other Lexus products, but let's try sport mode. And yes, there is less steering assist right now, which is actually a good thing, but I do get a little more sense of what's coming through the steering wheel. I think the steering overall is a little on the light side, as it tends to be for most Lexus and Toyota products. That's kind of my complaint. But I think there's actually pretty decent feel in here, especially on a not very good road. So the ride quality on this not very good road, this is pretty bumpy. Let's see if we can get into some worse sections. I think the ride quality is like actually very, very good in here. This is pretty typical Lexus kind of ride quality. I've got very nice damping. It's not giving me a lot of impact harshness over these broken up little bits of pavement. It feels very composed, and I'm not getting a lot of jounce from the rear end. It feels like it's well damped. I really like the shock valving in here. I like the spring rate. This feels very appropriate. So let's go back down the hill and let's see if we can get back to LA on this charge. 72 miles. I don't think we're gonna make it, so we're gonna charge up somewhere and see what the charging experience is like. So let's go there now. I made it to the delicious green glow of Electrify America, and I've driven 173 miles, and it says I've got 12 left, which means the theoretical range, driving the way that I do, is 185 miles. That's about 11 short of what you're supposed to be able to get. Connecting to my vehicle, let's see what happens. I'm gonna hit member. Initiating charging, that's a good sign. Uh-oh, charging has stopped. Let's try that again. Here's one thing Lexus could do a whole lot better. So I'm charging, it says I'm at 29% right now. So it's been going for about 6 minutes. That's not too bad. I'm getting decent charging speed, but the information I'm getting inside the vehicle is subpar. I actually don't know how many miles of range I've got. All I can tell is it's gonna tell me it's gonna take an hour and 45 minutes to charge fully. Clearly it's gonna ramp off at 80%, but I'm not getting any information about what kind of range I've got left. So the good news is I am charging, but the bad news is that Electrify America did not recognize my phone properly. It saw my account, but it doesn't recognize the fact that I am a $4 a month member, which gives me a preferential charging rate of, I think, about 36 cents per kilowatt hour. Instead, I'm being charged full regular rate, which is 48 cents. And so I've got a 35% charge. I've put in 50 kilowatt hours of juice, and I've been charged $24 so far. So come on, Electrify America, get your act together. Look at these lights on the door panels. This treatment is very, very cool. You have these little lights coming out of the dashboard over here. Oh, I really like that. It's a nice touch. Let's take a look inside the RZ. So what we've got here is a pretty comfortable, nice cabin space. The material on these seats is really, really nice. I think they call it ultra suede, and these are heated and they're also ventilated, and they really have a nice touch to them. It's suede. The steering wheel has something going on here too. I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but it just has a really nice touch to it. It doesn't feel like any steering wheel I've ever felt before, actually, which sounds kind of ridiculous. Let's power it up, and we can see in front of the driver, we have this information display, and it's not quite as big as I would have thought as I would have expected, because some other Lexus vehicles have a wider display. And then over here we have this massive, massive, massive display, which is overall it's pretty effective, and I think there's a lot to like about here. One thing I don't like is you've got no physical heating and ventilation controls except for these knobs right over here, but this is pretty responsive. What's also very interesting is down here, instead of having a glove box, you have this heating surface. So this is radiant heat. This is used to reduce the output, or the energy output required to heat the cabin. You've also got one right over here too, just by the underneath the steering column, and that's how you heat the car basically when it is cold outside. You got a wireless charging pad, and you got a pretty standard big box, glove box kind of thing right here, but no glove box over on the side there, just in the center. And you've also got this super cool sunroof, so check this out. Whoa, how cool is that? You got a little button over here. It's electrochromic, so you got little particles in there, little magnetic particles, which when you apply a current to them, they do that. They basically line up. It's very, very nice. And you've got a lot of nice soft touch materials in here. The seats are super comfortable as well. going to show you the back seat, but then we're going to come up here just for 1 second because I've got something that's kind of a little bit, well, something that I think could be improved. In the back seat, it is really super spacious back here. I've got tons and tons of knee room. This is like ridiculous amount of knee room, and I've got a ludicrous amount of headroom here too. I'm 5'9", so much room back here. Also a very nice space. I've got heating controls, or rather I've got ventilation, and then I've got heated seats back here too, and I've even got an AC. I'm not quite sure what you're going to do back here with that. I'm not going to use your radar detector back there. And then in the hatch area, this is a very spacious vehicle, actually. I'm surprised how spacious it is, and yet it doesn't feel like a big vehicle, which is what I like about it. Sorry for the mess back here, but you can see 60/40 folding split rear seats, loads and loads of cargo capacity. But let's go back up to the front and explain the one thing that I think I'm kind of surprised about. So here's the thing that's kind of odd. The navigation, of course, itself is quite good. It's pinch and zoom. It's very easy to use the navigation, but normally what you're going to have over here on this side or over on this side when you're taking a trip is an indication of exactly how many more miles of range you've got, when it recommends you should charge. Hey, maybe here's some chargers. Wow, we're super zoomed out. Even if you go to the control information, the drive information, or the trip information over here, there's basically nothing. Here's where I talk about the efficiency of the RZ. It's going to take a minute, so grab your favorite beverage. Before I started the trip, I charged up at my house. So that's a baseline charge to 100%. Then I drove 212 miles on mostly freeway and up and down a mountain, about 1,000 feet. I used 110 kilowatt hours of power, and that cost me $39.36. Now, because Electrify America basically ripped me off because they didn't charge me the 36 cents per kilowatt hour they should have, my cost should have been overall $33. Charging at home, I'm paying roughly 25 cents per kilowatt hour. That's California. It's almost double what the average is in the nation, which is somewhere around 14, 15 cents. So the efficiency I got in the RZ is about 1.9 miles per kilowatt hour overall. It's actually kind of on the lower end of the EV spectrum. And here's the thing to remember, I was driving with the cabin fan off. I was only using the ambient heat, and I wasn't using the air conditioning because it was the perfect temperature outside. If it had been hot or really cold, I would have had to turn that on, and then my efficiency would have dropped even further. So I did get a theoretical 189 miles of range, which is only 7 short of what Lexus says it's going to get. But if you're using the cabin heating and air conditioning, you can expect less range. But here's the kicker. I recently did a road trip in the Prius Prime. It was 356 miles, and that trip cost me just over $27. Just a quick refresher, the Prius Prime is a plug-in hybrid, and once you charge up the battery, you're able to get 40 to 45 miles on EV range alone before the gas engine kicks in. So it's actually pretty efficient overall. So my recommendation is if you need to do a bunch of road trips, the RZ is probably not your best choice. This is a typical Lexus in many ways. The build quality is exceptional, the cabin is beautiful inside, the seating materials are really nice, it is very spacious, more spacious than you might think for the size of the vehicle, and it is super comfortable to drive. The ride quality is great, the Mark Levinson audio system is fantastic, and personally I think it's a really good looking car. Now, if you're just driving around the city and your normal commute is 40-50 miles, this is going to be a great vehicle for you. If you need to do road trips, probably you might want to think about another vehicle, perhaps one of the very efficient plug-in hybrids that Toyota now offers, or another brand. There's another video right over here, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.